the pakoras or the samosas or the, I don't know, whatever, meals that we're excited about, some things that we see once a year. There's a running joke in some family members that dishes are only done once a year, or in specific occasions, things like that, right? We start thinking, about this. And, to be honest, joking aside, but even the Prophet ﷺ and companions were always excited about that approach, right? In fact, we hear some of the narrations mention that, 6 months prior to Ramadan coming in, the companions would make dua, and they would say, Allahumma ballighna Ramadan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, essentially the meaning of that dua or supplication or prayer that they're making is that they're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give them life to reach Ramadan, right? Because of the things that are associated with it. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when Ramadan would enter, he would greet the companions. He would be excited about it, and he would tell them, right? He would say, "Ataakum shahr Ramadan shahrun mubarak." He would say, the month of Ramadan has come. It's a blessed month. Farad Allahu alaykum siyama, right? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordained or established or made mandatory its fasting upon you. تفتح فيه أبواب السماء وتغلق فيها أبواب الجحيم, right? That the gates of the heavens are open in that month and the gates of the hell are closed. وتغل فيه مردة الشياطين, and the the heads of the shayateen, the devils, are chained, right? The major devils, they're chained. There's two opinions about this, but that's not the time for discuss this. But essentially, the shayateen, the devils, are chained in that month. لله فيه ليلة خير من ألف شهر. That in that month, right, there is a night that belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that's better than 1,000 months. That's referring to Laylat al-Qadr. من حرم خيرها فقد حرم. Whomever is deprived from its goodness, then he's truly deprived. Right? The Prophet ﷺ would say this, and this shows the excitement. And when we hear about, quite often, when it comes closer to Ramadan, we start hearing about the virtues of Ramadan, and the greatness of it, the blessings of it. And so it's very normal for us as Muslims to want to take advantage of that opportunity to improve our spirituality, right? And our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we all want to have, obviously, our sins forgiven in this month, because every single day is an opportunity for us in Ramadan to have our sins forgiven, right? Because we all want to enter Jannah. We all want to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we start to plan our goals, right? There's certain things that we want to plan, for the month of Ramadan. We look for different resources and how we can make the most of it, right? Does that sound normal to everybody? Yes? Right. So here's the question for you, right? So what are your plans or goals this Ramadan? Oh, by the way, I'm going to be asking you a lot of questions. So you already have your goals. What is your goal for Ramadan? What's your name? Lina. Nice to meet you, Lina. How old are you, Lina? Wait, 9. Good guess. Right. Excellent. To fast the entire month. That's excellent. Anybody has any goals? Adam, what's your goal? What's your goal in Ramadan? Do you have any goals in Ramadan? I'm going to give $1 million in charity, right? Yes? Oh, come on, man. You got $1 million? I think we need to be better friends over here. What are you going to do? What's your goal in Ramadan? You want to think about it? طيب. Yeah, Javed, I was going to ask you. What's your goal in Ramadan? To read the Quran. Half of it? The whole Quran. Good. Where's ABdullah? Yeah, ABdullah. What's your goal in Ramadan? To nap more often. No, that's not a goal. It's not a good goal. Huh? Ibadah. Napping is ibadah. I'm not going to comment on this, Shaykh. Because then you're going to say food is ibadah, right? Napping is ibadah. So you basically sleep all day and eat all night. It is true. Could be an ibadah for a purpose. That is true. No, seriously, guys. Do you have any, what are your goals? You guys didn't plan this? Did you guys plan already or not yet? Khatm al-Quran. Good. So finish the Quran. As much as you can. Like how many times? 5 times. Okay, good, excellent. Anybody else have any goals? Yes. Good. So he's saying he wants to complete. There's a book of hadith by Imam Bukhari. It's called Al-Adab al-Mufrad, which is exemplary manners. And he wants to finish reading that book in addition to the Quran. Excellent. Anybody else? Sisters, you have no goals? Are you serious? Yes. To what? Not waste time. Excellent one, right? Because honestly, all the things that you just talked about, right? If you don't waste time, you're never going to achieve it, right? Excellent. Jazakumullah khair. طيب. Last one. Why do you have set up goals? Because no, let me tell you why you don't set up goals. Because if you don't set up goals, you don't end up doing anything. Right? It's as simple as that. If you don't have goals, if you don't plan, then you plan to fail. Right? We walk in, we're like, we want to do, but what is it? You have, no, it's not. Yes, you have to fast. I understand that, Shaykh. Understand. But mashallah, Lena over here, right? She's 9 years old, right? Her plan is to fast entire Ramadan. That's an excellent goal, right? You have to fast entire Ramadan. But what else do you want to do? Is there anything else you want to do? Right? Somebody said finish the Quran. That's not something that's mandatory. That's good. Last one. MashaAllah. That's the next one. To pray all mandatory Salat Jama'ah. To pray the 5 mandatory prayers in Jama'ah. What do you say, Shaykh? You have to? You're making our lives difficult here, Shaykh. طيب. So here's a question for you guys, right? If we look at if you look at all these goals, right? You're going to notice they are very, or most of the plans that we make are very individual activities. Is that right? Yes? Right? Whether it is praying in Jama'ah, you're looking at yourself, I want to pray in Jama'ah, I want to do 5 khatmas, I want to give $1 million in charity, I want to... Why are you looking at me, Shaykh? You said you're going to give $1 million. Did you say that? Yes or no? Am I making things up? No? All right, good, excellent. Where's your dad? I'm going to make him sign on that one. But if you notice, they're very individual goals, right? Very individual goals. And this is not a bad thing, by the way. This is something that is a good thing, right? It's important because we need to improve ourselves, right? We need to, we need to uplift our iman and spirituality and improve our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, right, we should never forget that there's another important dimension that goes beyond ourselves, and it has to do with other people in our lives, right? Such as our family members, right? That we should take along with us in that journey, right? And the question is then, because I'm posing this, you should be asking yourself, okay, well, this is great, it's a great idea, but why is it important to engage our families along with us in Ramadan, right? It's a lot easier if we put our plans, focus, on target, we're ready to go. So why is it important, I'm saying it's important, but why is it important to engage our family along with us in Ramadan? I know this is not our usual session of me just talking and you guys listening, right? And that's on purpose. Okay, strengthen the ties, family members. Anything else? Sorry, just give me a second, Dr. Asaf. Go ahead. Get to Jannah together, share the goodness together, yes. Get more time with family together. Last one. Excellent verse. Excellent verse. Right, I'm going to start with that one. So the Shaykh over here, ABdullah, he he has used a verse from the Quran. He said, "Ya أيها الذين آمنوا قوا أنفسكم وأهليكم نارا وقودها الناس والحجارة." So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, "O you who believe, protect yourselves and your family members." Right? Protect yourselves and your family members from a fire that its fuel is people and rocks. Right? So you protect ourselves and your family. And so the reason why we want to make sure we involve our family members, not just us alone, we need to take our family members with us, is because it is our responsibility to take care of our family, right? And provide for them. Provision for them includes spiritual development. Right? We tend to fall into this idea that providing for the needs of our family is limited to education. And when we think of education, we think of secular education. And then providing them with shelter and clothing and food, and that's it. We're done, right? Very important aspect, like a fundamental aspect, especially as Muslims, we need to understand this, is their spiritual side, like spiritual development for our family members. This is a really important and imperative and vital aspect that we have to make sure that we nurture in our family as a group. And when I talk about family, I'm not talking about just children. Right? I'm talking about even spouses and siblings and parents. No matter how old they are, this is our job. Goes into that verse because that verse is general. It said, protect yourself and your family members. Right? This whole thing, the advice comes in. And when the Prophet ﷺ, in that very popular hadith, when he said, كُلُّكُمْ رَاعِي وَكُلُّكُمْ مَسْئُولٌ عَنْ رَعِيَّتِهِ. All of you are ra'i. It's translated as a shepherd. But really what it means is all of you are responsible. Right? All of you have subjects that you're responsible for, and you'll be questioned about that responsibility. You'll be questioned about your subjects, right? Who do you take care of, right? How do you deal with them? And so, which means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask us about this. This is why it's important for us not to forget our family members. Now, the other thing is, when the Prophet ﷺ said, none of you will truly believe until you love for your brother what you love for yourself, right? None of you will truly believe until you love for your brother, for you love yourself. So for example, in Ramadan, when we want to reach higher levels of iman, we want to accomplish the Quran, reading it 5 times or whatever, targets and goals we have, shouldn't we love that also to our brothers, Muslim brothers and sisters? The answer is yes. Our family has more right of that share. Our family has more right of that share. We should have that love for them even magnified, right? A lot more, it's more immense and intense. And so this is why we should do this, right? Now, the other reason we should bring our family along, so that's an excellent reason, but I'm going to mention a few other reasons. The second one is that developing individually without the rest of our family members will actually increase the gap between us, between family members, okay? If you leave your family member behind, they will increase that gap, which will manifest in in the form of increased difference of opinions. And you always will differ. You'll be like, no, we shouldn't do this. You'll be like, why not? Right? Well, because Allah said so. But I need it. Right? You're not on the same page. Right? So it will result in a difference of opinion, practices, and even understanding, which will also further translate into family problems. Because we're no longer on the same page. Right? We're not at the same, understanding or same level. That's why we should take our family members along with us in that journey, right? The third reason why we should remember our family and bring it along with that journey is that bringing our family along with us will help make our accomplishments in Ramadan have a more lasting effect. When we learn together, right, and improve together as Muslims, we will support one another and push one another in our endeavors, in our religious or Islamic or spiritual endeavors. It's more likely for a person to maintain, for example, their accomplishments after Ramadan when they have that support at home in their family members as opposed to not. Right? This is why, for example, it's a lot easier for us to fast 30 days in Ramadan and pray Qiyam every night because everybody around us is doing it. Outside of Ramadan, we find that a lot more difficult, right? Sometimes, we barely fast, 3 days or 2 days a month or even 1 day a month. Sometimes we have that difficulty is because we wake up in the morning and if our family members are not doing it, for example, we're like, that breakfast smells good today. right? Or like, oh, like, my wife or my mom cooked, like, my favorite dish today, right? It's when it's not happening together, you don't have that support, right? It makes it less probable that we will continue, right, capitalizing on our gains in Ramadan, right? Is that clear to everybody? Yes, go ahead, Isha.
Knowing that our faith is not an individual faith, it's a collective faith. It is also when we worship Allah together, we're talking about reading the Quran throughout the month of Ramadan. If we do it collectively on a family level, there will be more barakah.
Of course, there's more barakah, right? Yes, that is true. So the Shaykh over here is saying, like, like our religion is not an individual religion, it's a collective religion, right? And I want to clarify, of course, like, we're each accountable for ourselves. So there is a level of individuality in reality because we're all accountable for our own deeds, right? But it's not just an individual, it's also a community because it flourishes that way, right? So it is, yes, an individual and a community aspect with it. That's why we all collectively, like, encourage each other to do what's good. We also collectively, like, remind ourselves not to do things that are bad, right? It's that collectiveness, and this is how we tend to grow and become stronger. That is correct. Jazakumullah khair. It's true. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, enjoin in birr, which is all goodness, and taqwa, which is fearfulness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and do not enjoin on وَلَا تَعَوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. Ithm, which is disobedience, udwan, which is transgression. Right? Do not support one another and enjoin one another in sins and transgression. طيب. The last thing I'm going to mention is that one of the reasons why it's good to bring our families, like an idea, or why we should bring our families in that journey, is that in Ramadan is really, if you want to look at it, it's a time to intentionally slow down, right? Slow down from our worldly activities, put it that way, right? Not our religious activities, but more of our like, worldly distractions, to prioritize family time and to discover, like, the importance of togetherness in a world where actually is built now and designed to pull family members apart, right? We live in a time where it's very individualized, right? Everything we do is just tailored to us, and everybody just isolated doing their own thing, right? So it's time to put all that and kind of come together. Right. So that being said, like, if you look at Ramadan, then the reality there's, like, we're going to find that there is actually, it's a time for opportunities to like, for our families. But at the same time, there are challenges. We have to admit that. So for the next few minutes, I'm going to address those two parts and then move into a third section of more like a practical advice or things that we can do. And so the first part of this has to do with the question is, how does Ramadan provide an opportunity for family unity and strengthening their bonds, right? How does Ramadan do that? So that's the question, right? Think about it. Because if you understand that it's an opportunity, then we can take advantage of it. So how does Ramadan, right, provide an opportunity for families to come together, right, to unite and to strengthen their bonds? Think about what happens in Ramadan, right? How is that an opportunity? Like, where does that come from? Like, how does that happen?
The first thing is we are fasting together.
Okay.
That's the first thing. We are worshiping together.
Okay, so I'm gonna put that under a category of spiritual opportunities. Does this sound good? So spiritual opportunities, I like that one. Okay, so underneath that, spiritual opportunities, you'll have religious observance. Okay, but in this case, we want to make sure that's an opportunity to do together. So yes, we're fasting together as a family, right? Like, we can read the Quran together as a family. We can make dua together as a family. We can attend the Taraweeh as a family, and so forth. Okay, so this is where we're talking about the, like, increase. I think we're going to put that underneath social opportunities. I'm going to try to divide them, okay? Because people, when they're eating, they're not thinking, ibadah, mashallah, act of worship. They're thinking, this tastes good, right? Let's just eat. But it could be an ibadah, as Shaykh, like, Siraj had mentioned. Oh wait, never mind. You mentioned sleep, not food. I mentioned food. طيب. It's all about intentions. You're right. But if you talk about spiritual opportunities, right? This is this is a great time, spiritual opportunity to grow together, and Ramadan lends itself for us to be able to do that as a family, because every member is doing something that we can do it collectively together, right? And so this can really, what it can do is it can foster shared spiritual experiences and lead to even sometimes a deeper conversation about faith or values, especially if you have younger ones, or if you have people that are newly being introduced to Islam, right, at a later age, or whatever the case is. But it's something to bond over at a spiritual level, right? But the key is to kind of remind ourselves of these things, right? طيب. I'm going to mention one more thing under the spiritual opportunity, which is something that I've seen some people, mashallah, act upon. And I've seen it has a lot of, mashallah, great effect on them at multiple levels, but they do this as a family, is that they volunteer together as a family. So it's not just so this is not just the fasting together, whatever the case is, but no, they volunteer together at the masjid, for example, to do something, right? Whether it's a charitable activity as a family, for example, if they can volunteer for food bank, right? Helping those in need, packing food for the needy and so forth. And alhamdulillah, I think we do have here a not a food bank. What's it called? What do we call it, Shaykh? Food pantry. Thank you. Right, a food pantry here. That is it every month or every other weekend? Every month. Every month. All right. So every month. Right. I saw him here, but he is probably in a meeting. So every month we have that, for example, right? So coming together as a family, from every person, the father, the mother, the children, when you're coming together and doing something like this, right? It does have an impact, right? As a family, right? So the children will understand the importance, for example, of giving to the community, right? And you do it together, so it does strengthen that family bond because it's shared experience. But it also quite often acts as a way, for example, to soften our hearts. When we see those who are less fortunate than us, that we are participating in helping them in it and realizing how much blessings that we have from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it does soften our hearts. So I'll give you an example where this comes from. When you start serving the less fortunate, the Prophet ﷺ, a person came and told the Prophet ﷺ that I'm having a hardness in my heart, right? My heart is a bit hard, and so he said, "Imsah ala ra's al-yatim." He said, wipe on the head of the orphan, right? Now, obviously, it's not just wiping it, but it's more being being gentle to the orphan, right? To care of the orphan, to show the orphan an expression of affection, because they need it. They have been deprived of having, for example, a father, right? And so you act upon that, and that would naturally soften a person's heart. Okay. طيب. What category did I mention? So this is the spiritual. I mentioned another category. What did I mention? Social. Good. Social category. Okay. So social, right? This has Ramadan also, if you look at it, there's a lot of social activities going on, right? Whether it is sharing meals, as you mentioned, right? Eating together, having iftar together. And this is really important. When you break your fast together as a family, right? Or have suhoor together as a family, this creates an opportunity for us to sit together, right? And converse and have a conversation. Even if you're rushing for suhoor, oh my God, I have 5-10 minutes, that excitement level, and everybody's yelling. That whether you realize it or not, it actually creates a memory, right? It's an interesting form of bond, even if it looks chaotic at that time, right? But it does create some sort of a bond. Doing that together is important, especially in our modern time, right? I can't tell you how many times, I've been speaking to certain families, and I ask them a simple question, is how many times a day do you sit together as a family and have a meal, right? Quite often I hear them say, well, only on weekends sometimes. And I ask, well, what happens? He's like, oh, whoever gets hungry eats on their own, right? Because it just the modern time that we live in, the way things are being dealt, is each individual is involved in their own activities, right? For whatever reason it is. and they hardly come together as a family and eat. And realistically speaking, that has a huge negative impact on the family relationship. It does, right? It dismantles the bonds between them. Parents no longer have an idea what's happening in the child's life. The children have no idea what's going in the parents' lives. No family member they no longer understand what's in the minds of one another or the important things that are happening in their life. Coming together purposely, and I do highly recommend that you should at least have one meal together. It has to happen, right, as much as you can, because it does have an effect. Like the Prophet ﷺ would dedicate family time, and I hope inshallah you guys remember, if you were here in our session of a day in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet ﷺ had his own family time, a specific time, right, that he would sit there with his family, or he purposely would go visit his family members and eat with them, right? There's a reason behind it that strengthens the bonds and ties between family members. Now, of course, this is like from an Islamic perspective, of course, and understanding. But for people who like scientific evidences, studies did actually show that families who eat together regularly have a stronger bond, better communication, and improved mental and emotional well-being. Right? You're no longer isolated. Each person grabs their food, goes to the room in front of their screen, right? Or they grab their food sitting on the couch and in front of their screen. Right? That's detrimental, right? For our mental health, for our relationship, for all these things, right? And so this is under the social activity. I find it's more ever now. Family meals will play a vital role in socializing in our life, as a family, right? But it also, as children are growing up, even at the teenager, it will, it's an opportunity to instill, values, right? Have discussions. It provides a platform for the parents and the children to connect, but also discuss and bring up, for example, Islamic principles, cultural stories, family histories, shared moments, whatever the case is, right? So you can see why this could be important in terms of a social aspect. Yes, Shaykh. Yeah, it's their breakfast at that time. Right. It is a great idea, but in realistically speaking, a lot of parents or mothers will be very hesitant about that, right? Because the child would have school, will disturbing their sleep, all these things, right? In fact, unfortunately, and I'm not saying this is correct, right? We obviously have to align ourselves with what is Islamically correct, but sometimes family members, whether father or mother, due to their compassion and affection to their children, they sometimes don't wake them for Fajr. They're like, haram, let them sleep, right? No, that's not how it works, right? Let me give you another interesting fact. Research has showed that it is healthier to wake up in the middle of the night than have a constant 8-hour sleep, right? It is healthier. So Qiyam al-Layl apparently is a lot healthier, right? Getting up for Fajr at 4 o'clock in the morning or 4:30 and then praying and then continuing 2 hours of sleep is a lot healthier. SubhanAllah. This is why we should, as Muslims, we should understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's legislation is best for us, right? It is best for us. As human beings, we do understand the importance of scientific endeavors and discoveries, but they will always be limited because they're limited by our observations. And the more we observe things, the more we're going to be changing our minds about things. But in the end, what Allah has legislated will always be better for us in this world and the hereafter, right? At every level, mental, health, spiritual, you name it, right? Wallahu alam. طيب. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Social opportunities, right? Other social opportunities obviously can include families planning outings together. And outings, I mean it can be visiting family friends to have iftar with them, right? or going together to a restaurant to have iftar, for example, or to have suhoor, or to go together, make like a drive to a specific masjid that, like, there's a beautiful reciter, for example, or that there's an event in. That is like a time for socialization. Like, you can capitalize on that, right? And so this is how, for example, like, the Ramadan provides a opportunity, right, to, at a social level now, for families to get together, right? We can talk about even like, socially helping each other, right? Encouraging family members to help one another in tasks, right? To come together as a family. Like, now there's one more aspect I'm going to mention over here as an opportunity, and it has to do with creating new family traditions, right? So Ramadan can like, bring, like, can be an opportunity to bring family together, because it can help, or it provides a foundation or a land that families can create new traditions together, right? Whether, for example, like, preparing specific dishes, like, or like, or a way of picking what they're going to eat this year, or how they're going to decorate their homes, and what decorations are going to be involved, or which relatives to visit, whatever the case is, right? So we're talking about just creating a family tradition in Ramadan that you're used to it. And we're not, like, none of us is strange to family traditions. We notice that each of our families, like our family, like, each of us has a family that they do things specifically than other families. Is that right? We're not carbon copies, are we? Our families are not the same. Like, in my house, we do it this way. Have you guys ever heard that before? Yes? Well, that's a family tradition, right? That's a family tradition, right? In our house, biryani is done this way, right? No, in our house it's done this way. Or in our house, we break our fast on this way. But what the whole aspect is, you can create a family tradition that, like, have a, like, a very lasting, right, memory and a sense of shared identity. That's kind of important. Okay? Like, that being said, this is all, like, these are opportunities. But the reality is, we have to admit that there are going to be some challenges that we're going to face to kind of try to attain this. Okay? And like, these are, I guess we're going to mention some potential challenges. But the reason we're going to mention them is because you have to understand that these challenges, if not addressed, they can disrupt that unity and spiritual growth we're trying to get to. Right? So what are some of the challenges you guys think that are out there? So what are some of the challenges in Ramadan that might disrupt that unity and spiritual growth? Yes. Not having a large enough Muslim community around you. That's actually very interesting, because depending on it, it can be a negative thing or a positive thing. I'll give you an example. People who are smaller in number, right, tend to become tighter together. Is that right? So that can maybe perhaps create a stronger bond and be more positive. But if those small numbers are dispersed, right, they're just dispersed, and they don't come together, then that can, you're right, can be a challenge, right? But that is true. But alhamdulillah, we're close to the Falah Center, like, this area, alhamdulillah, we have a good sized Muslim community. So inshallah, that's not something we can worry about. But what are some of the challenges? Come on, think what makes it difficult for you. Yes. Time is short. What do you mean time is short, Shaykh? We have 24 hours a day. You want 27 or 28? طيب. Time management, right? So it is true, right? Time management can be an issue. So balancing work, family obligations, the increased, like, religious activities that we do, that can be a challenge. Now I'm going to relate it how this can cause some sort of discord or lack of unity, or harm the unity in religious and spiritual growth, is that these can cause some sort of stress, right? And conflict, especially if family members have different priorities and expectations, right? So it is true that can be something that can result in a difficulty, right? Anything else? Getting out of our habits. Like bad habits, you mean? Okay, physical demands, right? It is true, physical demands. Because fasting in this case, like he's saying, you're used to eating, used to drinking at certain times. So it's true. We're talking about fasting can be physically demanding because you're no longer eating as usual or drinking as usual, which will result in either fatigue or dehydration. The change in your sleeping pattern sometimes doesn't help either. Okay, and so this can make a person very irritable, very irritated easily, and tensions within family can happen, right? The term hangry, you guys heard that before, right? Especially the first few days, if we're not used to practicing ahead of time of fasting and all these things. It is true. Okay, that is true. Type anything else? Varying levels of religious observance, for example. Okay, that is true. Okay, so differing levels of religious observance within the family can cause friction sometimes, right? Some members may be more devout than others, which can lead to some misunderstandings or feeling of judgment or lack of respect or whatever the case is. That can cause, right, some sort of disunity. Anything else? How is that going to affect the family unity and spiritual growth? Oh, okay, but in this case, it'll be incidental. That's not the norm. We want to think of more within the bell-shaped curve, right? Not the outliers, right? But what about external pressures? Not just work. So here's what I'm thinking about, right? So when we live in a world that's very fast-paced and materialistic, right? It's very focused on doing things quickly, right? And attaining things quickly, but also very materialistic. That creates a constant distraction for us. That's the external pressure I'm talking about, right? The constant distraction, whether it is technology, right? Our phones that are always with us, for example, right? And social media, and I need to take a picture of my iftar, or their iftar looks better than my iftar, I have to up them, or I got whatever the case is, right? Or the reels that we're going through, and oh my God, I gotta think of food to eat, and 3 hours later, you're still watching food, right? Just simple example, right? This will make it very challenging to disconnect and focus and reflect on our religion and our spiritual growth, let alone actually communicating with our family members that are sitting beside us also on phones, right? So that's, I'm talking about external pressure, whether it is social media or whatever the case is. Those are things that can perhaps disrupt or be some sort of a difficulty, right? Or a challenge that can disrupt our objective of having that family unity and spiritual growth, right? And once again, it's important for us to be aware of those potential things so that we can take steps to address them, right? If we know what they are, we can address them. Now, of course, one of the interesting challenges is actually more like social obligations, right? If you have huge families, besides in addition to attending Taraweeh, you have to go visit relatives, you have to participate in community events, and do all these things, which could put a lot of strain on an individual because it can come back to lack of time. For example, I can only do so much of them, and it can be very difficult for families, especially if they have younger children, right? They're already struggling with time management when you have younger children who takes care of them, dividing all these things. And so that can create some sort of, a challenge for spiritual growth and family unity, okay? But that being said, one of the quickest ways, obviously, to to overcome some of these things is to have clear communication, a plan, a mutual understanding, to compromise on certain things and so forth. It would help with some of those challenges. Patience is key. Actually, I'm going to get to that, inshallah. طيب. So, what I'd like to end with, inshallah, today is more of practical strategies to kind of foster family unity and spiritual growth. Okay, so things that we can do. So how can we strengthen our family bonds and spirituality, right? And really, it's not rocket science, right? It's based on the main idea, a very simple idea, that we just find ways to engage our family members in the things that we already do, right, in Ramadan, right, to make the most out of Ramadan. So things that we're already doing, but how is it that we can engage the rest of our family members in that same activity, right? And so in the sense that, what we're doing over here is we're doing our normal activities, but we're bringing our family together to create that tradition, right? To have more of a positive impact on all of us as a collective, and provide that opportunity, or establish the opportunity to kind of talk more each other, to spend more time together, to grow together spiritually in knowledge and so forth, right? Now I do understand that some of the things I'm going to mention are not, they may not all be suitable, right, for everyone, due to perhaps work restraints, school restraints, or obligations and so forth. But some of these suggestions, inshallah, can be suitable, right, and can be attainable, and it does not have to take a lot of time, right? But we have to understand, for this to work, right, these suggestions to work, and for us to also overcome some of these challenges, we have to bear in mind that, one, we need to plan and communicate with each other, right? We need to plan ahead and communicate with each other, right? Which means that it'd probably be a good idea to have a family pre-Ramadan meeting, right? I don't know what family members do in terms of vacations. Do you guys just decide we're going for a vacation, we're taking the family, or do you have a vacation family meeting? What should we do? It's dictatorship, I get it. Okay, I understand. Is this what happens? Huh? Dictatorship? All right, alhamdulillah. طيب, do you guys ever have family meetings for something? You do? Not when a disaster happens, like before to plan something, right? I understand emergency family meetings when disasters happen or something bad is happening. But no, so take opportunities of that. It's similar to that, right? So you have your pre-Ramadan meeting to discuss, all right, what are your goals? What are you going to do, right? What are the expectations? What are the responsibilities? So have that pre-Ramadan meeting, right, as a family. It will help, smoothing things out, right? Because I'm going to mention suggestions, inshallah, but what I'm trying to do over here is, how can we overcome some of those difficulties, but also have a good plan, right, of what we're doing. Now also, because I mentioned communication, it is, it's important to kind of, as family members, to come together and emphasize the importance of open and respectful communications throughout Ramadan, right? Especially if somebody, for example, is stressed, to kind of communicate that, to kind of understand that. If there's a change of plan, or you're communicating, if, are the roles being met? That communication is important, right? Now, the second thing that's important for us to do is to limit distractions, okay? Limit distractions as much as we can. What I mean by distractions will distract us away from our goals, okay? So it would be a good idea, for example, and I know kids are not going to like this, right? By the way, parents are involved in this. Adults have a fault in this too, right? But for example, having no screen time at all, like TV, shut it off completely, right? Don't look at your brother. Why are you so upset about that? Right? No, but really, what are you going to lose if you don't have TV all year long? Not all year. Let's start baby steps. 1 month long, right? No TV. What's going to happen? You're going to talk to each other more? Right? Is that a bad thing? Right? You're going to play with each other more? That's just kind of interesting. I can't remember whether it was this like a kind of like a documentary on a research thing, looking at what happens when kids are they're prevented from watching TV. They're addicted to watching TV. It was kind of curious what happened, right? So within the first day or two, they're constantly bickering, right? Because TV filled their time, distracted them. They don't know how to interact together or fill their time with entertainment, right? So they would bicker for the first few days, 4 or 5 days. But then the following few days, they started playing with each other, okay? And then after 2 or 3 weeks, going to the 4th week, those kids started becoming creative, and their house started turning into crafts workshops of things they would do with their hand and play with each other, right? Their minds are expanding. They're starting to think outside the box. All of that, the social level, the creative level, is gone when they're sitting in front of a screen. Adults the same, by the way, right? The same falls for adults, right? Whether with your children or with your spouse or with your sibling. We lose that when we're just sitting there in front of a screen, right? So turn it off, right? Block your social media. You don't, there's nothing important. Of course, I'm not telling you, not to connect with your families abroad and all these things, but you can find other means of doing it, right? You can use some sort of, text message format as opposed to Instagrams and Facebooks and I don't know what else is there. WhatsApp's for texting, Shaykh. I'm talking about, TikTok and, Instagram and Snapchats and all these things, they're meant to get you addictive. You're rolling through one after the other, right? That really has to go, right? And please, all these, Ramadan episodes, stop them, right? They're not going to help you achieve your goals. They're not. They're a distraction. And so the advice is block those distractions, right, during Ramadan and focus on spending quality time together. Focus on achieving your goals. Would it be difficult at the beginning? Of course it is, because you're breaking your routine, but you're also creating new routines. It will take about 2 to 3 weeks to create a new routine and be comfortable with it, but once it happens, it becomes a habit, right? That's it. You created a new tradition, a new routine. طيب. The third thing I'm gonna mention is for us to kind of do this properly is those challenges we mentioned, they can result in some sort of conflict. So what we need to do is you need to make sure that you as a family, you address the conflict constructively, okay? Which means by what? Being patient and understanding, right? You might be hangry, right? The other person just all right, this person is upset because they're hungry. Be patient with them, right? Remember, fasting can be a challenge, right? So be patient and understanding with each other. Have, as I mentioned already, have an open communication. But what I mean over here is a bit more of allowing each other to understand that you have a safe space with one another to communicate your thoughts and your feelings without being judged or yelled at, right? That's part of the understanding. But also to show appreciation to one another, right? Express that gratitude and appreciation to each other's effort and your contribution because you're doing this as a family now, right? Try to find solutions together. If there's a problem, solve it together, right? What would work with us, right? So that is shura. Essentially, it's the whole concept of shura, right? You're involving one another to make a decision, right? But that being said, I went longer than I expected. But here's just a few things, right? That suggestions of activities that can help bring the family together, right? The first one I'm going to mention is prior to Ramadan, get into the spirit of Ramadan, okay? Whether you're adults or young, this can be fun in different levels, right? So for example, decorating the house, right? We should try to, involve ourselves and our children to change, the way our house looks. And decorating, of course, you can go from hanging things to changing the entire, outline of your apartment, move couches around, but it's up to you, obviously, what you're comfortable with. But it's one of the best ways of starting preparing for Ramadan as a family, right? Just to work together to decorate the house. And I really feel that this is something important, especially in an environment that we live in, that we see decorations of other, for example, religious, faiths, right? Our children will want to be engaged in that. They're drawn to that, right? And so we should really, as much as we can, get them involved in that process that they're decorating, but it also will give them a sense of identity, right? This is our Ramadan, right? Where Ramadan is coming, right? That excitement, whatever they're doing, they're crafts if they want to do crafts and hang them, take pictures of them, get them involved in that process. This is something that is beneficial, right? Now, by the way, there's a lot of ideas available online. Like, I'm not the best one with ideas with this, but if you search, things of, decorations for Ramadan, you'll find them, right? But the whole important thing is when we do this, we create a very distinct positive sensory stimulation, that is important to introduce positive connections with our family members, right? With children, that is associated with Ramadan, right? It's like a happy memory, right? For us together as adults and as children. طيب. In that preparation, it also give, family member, as I mentioned, family member sense of identity. But it's also an excellent, if you do outside decoration, it's also an excellent opportunity, right, to raise questions from your neighbors. They'll ask you what's happening, right, what's going on, right? So this is an opportunity for us as a family, like individuals, to kind of, say we're Muslims, we have Ramadan coming up, it's a joyous moment, a moment for us, or a time for us, and so forth. It's like a da'wah, but once again, it instills into our family members and children that it's okay to openly express your Islam. That's really important, right? Especially in a time where everything else is being expressed. Right? We have to make sure we're able to do that. طيب. The other thing we can do is getting into the spirit of Ramadan is to involve every family member in the preparation process, right? Allocate who's going to do, right? So which means involve each other, especially if they were talking about children, in the meal planning, right? And the cooking, age appropriate, of course, iftar organization, whether it's a table setup or it's a cleanup, general house preparations for Ramadan, get the children involved in the grocery shopping list. What do they want to eat? Okay, find what we need for it. We're doing this as a family, right? This is something that's important. And I do understand we fell into the habit that either the mother goes up and brings the groceries, or the father goes and brings the groceries, and the kids are just waiting at home to be served, right? It shouldn't work that way, right? It's not like that, right? طيب. One thing that you can also do is for the preparation of Ramadan, or set the the mood for it, is to, as a family, set spiritual goals together, right? Sit together and ask each other what are our spiritual goals, because it would encourage one another, create some sort of accountability, right? And so this is basically it helps also the children become very creative, or us as individuals even, to develop our mindset and become very creative, but also builds resilience. Because if I say I'm going to achieve this goal, right, and I hold myself to it, that creates something in us, right? The whole thing of we want to attain something, right? Now, whether we can also brainstorm with our family members of what we in terms want to change of our habits. Those are goals, right? I want to develop this new, for example, quality or attribute, or I want to let go of a bad habit, right? This is something that's important, right? You're working this as a family. طيب. The other thing that can be done to bring in terms of activities to bring the family together is obviously involve the whole family in acts of worship, right? For example, making dua together, right? The time of iftar is a great opportunity, right, to make dua. One just on top of my head, you can always discuss on the table what was your dua that you made, right? Now, by the way, this has multiple dimensions of importance, because it will tell us, for example, especially when talking about kids, what's on their mind, what do they care about? Why is it important for them? You open that discussion. Why did you make that dua, right? Why is this important? Do you think this is the best thing? Or how would it benefit you, right? Or do you think, you gain insight into the minds of every family member, right? Whether it's father or mother. For example, if the father says, my dua is to, give happiness to my children in this one day hereafter, the children will realize how much the father, for example, would care about, about them, right? They gain the insight of their thought process. So sharing your dua, discussing it with one another, right, and doing it aloud together would be beneficial. But it also could be opportunity to teach one another of how to be very conscious about your dua, how to verbalize it. But even if there's sunnah dua, that we learn it together, right? Other activities can include expressing gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And I've seen these I've seen this on somewhere, like a gratitude tree, right? Like each person would have like this tree, kind of put it up in your, like, somewhere in your house, and, like, you encourage the entire family to consistently reflect on what they're thankful of, to write it down, for example, or whatever the case is, or like, each person would write like a posted note, for example, stick it on the wall, right, under their name of what they're grateful for, or even, like, you can like, have prompted questions, right? For example, like, on the first day, what kind of food are you most grateful for, right? The day number 2, like, who in your life you're most grateful for. So there's different ways to do that. And what this does, it makes us very conscious of the blessings of Allah upon us, right? That helps that spiritual growth, right? But it also can even, like, spill into understanding, being grateful for each family member that they're there, right? Other ideas could be like, for example, learning together as a family, right? Dedicate some time, for example, 5 to 10 minutes every day together to learn something new, whether it's by watching a short Islamic video, for example, right? Or by reading a verse from the Quran or a hadith and trying to understand it, right? What lessons can we learn from it? Does not need to take very long, right? 5 to 20 minutes is more than enough. Like, keep it short, right? Simple, but also make it fun. Like, for example, you can introduce like a quiz, like, at the end of it with prizes, or whoever gets the most points at the end of Ramadan, for example, gets a, like, of course, in addition to the Eid gift, this is something even additional, right? Like, create that competition between one another. Healthy competition, of course, inshallah, right? Whether it's also including, like, all the family members in terms of, like, nightly prayers, waking one another, each other, or making it a fun way or another. But those are simple activities that can help nurture that family together, right? One idea, subhanAllah, one idea that came out from COVID is that some family members created a prayer space at their home. Like, I really loved that idea. Like, whether it's in a basement or in a corner of the living room, but this becomes your prayer space. In Ramadan, we read Quran there, right? We sit there for, like, our sunnah prayers, or we come pray jama'ah together there. I think this is just an amazing idea, right? To have that and create an atmosphere for the entire family, right? So anyway, those are just a quick few things, right? And top, like, inshallah, hopefully they'll be beneficial. But I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to, like, use this Ramadan as an opportunity to develop spiritually, right? To get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as individuals, as family members. That inshallah, that we, like, exit out of this Ramadan better than we had entered it. That we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be, like, to allow us to be among those who are forgiven all their sins in Ramadan, along with our family members, and that we all are like, even just go out to the community and become as a stronger community together, and that we use every opportunity to improve ourselves as individuals, as Muslims, so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with us. And so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be pleased with us in this world and the hereafter. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to be resurrected with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam the hereafter, and not deprive us of, similar to how we've been deprived of him in this world. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the ability and the power and the strength to implement all these things, to give us the strength to become better Muslims. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enable us to read the Quran and reflect on it and act upon it. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to, like, to complete this entire month in the best way we can. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. And I apologize for taking longer than usual. Where's Shaykh Siraj, Shaykh? He went home already? All right, did he take his chai? We have chai at the back. So you guys can help yourself, inshallah. جزاكم الله خير. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. جزاكم الله خير.